So many times I have asked myself why my mother treats me so bad, more like a slave than a daughter, knowing that I am her only child. I love and obey her and could do anything to see her smile. This is not the case of choosing one child over another. There's none elsewhere. It's just the two of us. The answer never came until one day. Before we continue, if you love our stories, do well to encourage us by hitting the like button, share, and subscribe for more. My name is Alice. I'm 25 years old, and up until last week, I didn't know the answer to that question. For my entire life, I have been the invisible engine behind Lumina, my family's massive fashion empire. I design the clothes, pick the fabrics, and manage the logistics, all from a basement office while my mother, Diane, takes the credit. I thought if I worked hard enough, she would finally love me. But I was wrong. It started at the summer white party, the biggest event of our season. The ballroom was blindingly bright. I was standing in the shadows backstage, frantically stitching a torn hem on a model's dress before she walked out. That was my life, making sure everything was perfect for Diane while I remained unseen. Diane tapped the microphone, sparkling in diamonds I had paid for with my designs. "To secure our legacy," she announced, her voice booming, "I am thrilled to say that my daughter Alice will be marrying Mr. Clint Doherty." I froze. The needle pricked my finger. I had never agreed to this. Clint was 45, a ruthless investor. He stepped backstage, walked up to me, and gripped my shoulder hard. He leaned in, smiling for the cameras, and whispered so only I could hear, "Don't look so scared. I practically own the company now. I might as well own the mascot, too." 10 minutes later, the applause had faded, and I was standing in Diane's private study. The air in the room was freezing cold, just like her. My hands were shaking as I looked at the woman I had spent my whole life trying to please. "I can't marry him, Mom," I begged, my voice cracking. "He's cruel. I've heard the stories about him, and I don't love him." Diane didn't even turn around. She was pouring herself a glass of scotch at the crystal bar, her back stiff and elegant. She took a slow sip before answering. "Love," she scoffed. "Love is for poor people, Alice. We have a liquidity crisis. The brand is bleeding money. You are the only asset I have left that's worth anything." She finally turned to face me. Her eyes were dead, void of any warmth. "Clint is investing $50 million. The price is you. You do this, or I cut you off completely. No job, no apartment, no name. You'll be on the street with nothing. How could you do this?" I cried, tears streaming down my face. "I'm your daughter. I'm your only family." Diane stepped closer, her expensive perfume suffocating me. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and deep disgust. "You owe me this, Alice," she hissed. "After all I sacrificed to take in a stray like you." The word stray hit me like a physical slap. She didn't see me as her child. She saw me as a debt to be collected. The next day, the nightmare became real. Diane forced me to go to a business lunch with Clint to discuss the wedding details. I sat across from him at the most expensive restaurant in the city, picking at a salad I couldn't eat. Clint wasn't interested in food, and he certainly wasn't interested in romance. He was interested in paperwork. He didn't ask me about my favorite flowers or what music I wanted for the ceremony. Instead, without a word, he slid a thick leather folder across the white tablecloth. "Sign this before the appetizer comes," Clint said, not even looking up from his phone. I opened it. It wasn't just a prenup. It was an intellectual property assignment contract. The legal words were dense, but I understood them perfectly. It stated that upon our marriage, any creative work, sketches, designs, or concepts created by the wife would become the sole, permanent property of the husband. I looked up at him, horrified. "You want to own my mind? You want to own my drawings?" Clint chuckled, a dry, humorless sound that made my skin crawl. He took a sip of his wine. "Let's be honest, Alice. You're the one who draws the pretty pictures. Diane is just the face, but you have no business sense. I'm doing you a favor. I'll manage the assets. You just keep drawing in the back room." He reached across the table and patted my hand. His skin felt dry and cold. "Diane tells me you're obedient. That's a good quality. Stay that way, and I won't have to discipline you." That night I made a decision. I couldn't do it. I would rather starve on the street than belong to a monster like Clint. I was in my bedroom, frantically throwing clothes into an old duffel bag. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely zip it up. I grabbed my passport from the drawer and checked under the loose floorboard where I kept a small stash of emergency cash I had saved for my meager stipend. I was reaching for my coat when I heard a noise. It was a soft, digital chirping sound. It wasn't my phone. I froze and looked around the room. I followed the sound to the window. Taped underneath the sill, hidden by the heavy velvet curtains, was a cheap black burner phone. It was vibrating against the wood. My heart hammered against my ribs. How did that get there? Who had been in my room? I peeled the tape off and stared at the screen. Unknown number. I pressed answer and held it to my ear, my breath catching in my throat. "Hello." "Don't run," a voice whispered. It was a woman's voice, raspy, terrified, and urgent. I gripped the phone tighter. "Who is this? How did you get this phone in here?" "If you run, she wins," the voice hissed, sounding like she was looking over her shoulder. "She's watching the exits, Alice. She has security on the perimeter right now. If you try to leave tonight, she'll have you committed to a psychiatric ward. She's already signed the papers." I dropped the bag to the floor. Why? Why is she doing this to me? There was a heavy pause on the other end. Then the woman spoke again, her voice trembling with a sad truth. "I know why she hates you, Alice. It's not because you're clumsy. It's because you have your father's eyes." The next morning, I went to work as if nothing had happened. I had to play the part. The voice on the phone, I didn't know who she was, but she knew things. She had told me to check the internal mailroom before Diane's assistant got there. I slipped into the mailroom at 6 a.m. It smelled of ink and dust. I sorted through the pile of letters on the main desk until I saw it, a plain manila envelope with my name handwritten on it. No return address. My fingers trembled as I tore it open. Inside wasn't a document. It was a photograph, an old Polaroid photograph. It showed a man I recognized instantly. My father, the founder of Lumina, who had died of a heart attack when I was a baby. He was laughing, looking younger and happier than in any of the portraits hanging in the hallway. But he wasn't hugging Diane. He was holding a woman with wild, curly hair and a kind smile. A woman I had never seen before. And in that woman's arms was a baby. I looked closer at the woman's face. It was like looking in a mirror. She had my nose, my chin, my eyes. A small note was paper-clipped to the back of the photo. The handwriting was jagged, as if written in a hurry. "Diane isn't your mother. She stole you to keep the money. She is your jailer. Go to the public restroom in Centennial Park. Look behind the mirror." Suddenly, I heard the sharp click-clack of high heels coming down the hallway. It was Diane's walk, fast, aggressive, purposeful. She was coming to the mailroom. Panic surged through me. I shoved the photo down the front of my shirt, right against my skin, just as the door handle began to turn. Diane swept into the mailroom, her eyes scanning the space like a hawk. "What are you doing in here?" she snapped. I forced a smile, pressing the hidden photo against my chest. "Just looking for the RSVP stationery samples," I lied, my voice surprisingly steady. She stared at me for a long second, then huffed. "Well, hurry up. You have an appointment." 2 hours later, I was sitting in the public park bathroom, the only place I knew there were no cameras. My hands shook as I felt behind the cold porcelain mirror, just as the note had instructed. There it was. I locked the stall door and ripped the envelope open. Inside was a DNA test result, dated 24 years ago. I scanned the columns, my breath hitching. Subject 1, Diane Lakewood. Subject 2, Alice Lakewood. The result was in bold red letters. 0% match. Then I looked at the second page. Subject 1, Harrison Lakewood. Subject 2, Alice Lakewood. 99.9% match. The world stopped spinning. It wasn't just a feeling anymore, it was science. My entire life, the servitude, the insults, the constant reminder that I was a stray she saved was a lie. She hadn't adopted me out of charity. She had stolen me to keep control of my father's trust fund. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror. The sadness that had weighed me down for years evaporated. In its place, a cold, hard rage began to burn. The next morning, I walked into the dining room for breakfast. Usually I was a nervous wreck, spilling coffee and avoiding eye contact. Today I was deadly calm. I sat down across from Diane, unfolded my napkin and buttered my toast. Diane looked up from her tablet, raising an eyebrow. "You're quiet today." I took a slow bite, swallowed, and looked her right in the eyes. "I've thought about it, Diane. You were right. The family legacy comes first. I can't be selfish." I took a sip of juice. "I'll marry Clint. I'll do whatever is necessary to save the company." Diane froze. She searched my face for sarcasm, for rebellion, for any sign of a lie. But I gave her nothing but submission. Slowly, a smug smile spread across her face. She relaxed, her shoulders dropping. She thought she had broken me. She thought her tool was working again. "Finally," she sighed, going back to her screen. "I knew you would come to your senses." I smiled back, but behind my teeth I was screaming. "I just want to make you proud." "Mother," I said softly. The word tasted like poison in my mouth. I saw her flinch slightly, just for a fraction of a second. She hated that word. And now I knew exactly why. She wasn't my mother. She was the monster who stole me from her. Later that afternoon, I sat in my car in the far corner of the grocery store parking lot. I checked my mirrors. No one was following me. I dialed the number on the burner phone. "I have the results," I said, my voice flat. "Then you know," the raspy voice answered. "I'm Joy. I'm your mother." Hearing her say it made tears prick my eyes, but I pushed them back. "Why didn't you come for me? Why did you leave me with her?" "She threatened to kill you," Joy whispered, her voice breaking. "When your father died, Diane told me that if I ever tried to claim you or the inheritance, she would make you have a tragic accident. I had to disappear to keep you alive, Alice. I'm so sorry." "I'm an adult now," I said, gripping the steering wheel. "She can't hurt me anymore." "She can if she controls the money," Joy warned. "Listen to me closely. Your father didn't leave the company to Diane. He left it to his blood issue. That's you. But the true will is missing. Diane hid it the day he died. If you marry Clint, the laws change. You need to find that will before the wedding, or she wins forever." The hunt began the next day. I used my new role as the obedient bride to get access to the company archives. I told Diane's assistant I needed to find nostalgic photos of my father for a wedding slideshow. It was the perfect excuse. I spent hours in the dusty basement, surrounded by bankers' boxes. But I wasn't looking for photos. I was looking for the father's personal asset logbook from the year he died. My fingers were covered in gray dust when I finally found it. Safety Deposit Box 404, First National Bank. I flipped to the access log. The last person to sign for the key was Diane, 2 days after his funeral. But the key hadn't been returned to the company safe. I closed the book, my heart racing. If the key wasn't at the bank and it wasn't in the office, there was only one place Diane would keep the evidence of her crime. She was arrogant. She liked to keep her trophies close. It had to be in the house, in her private suite, the one room I was strictly forbidden to enter. I stared at the logbook and realized that to save my future, I was going to have to rob the woman who stole my past. That evening, we had a celebratory dinner with Clint at the estate. He was already drunk on power and probably scotch. He sat at the head of the table, my father's seat, laughing loudly at his own jokes. "The merger is going to be historic," Clint bragged, waving his fork. "I'm going to fire the rest of the design team. Too much overhead. We can outsource the basics." He looked at me, a cruel glint in his eye. "You can do the work of 10 people, right, darling? We'll chain you to that desk and save millions." He was talking about enslaving me, right to my face. A week ago I would have cried. Tonight I poured him more wine. "You're so smart, Clint," I said, my voice dripping with fake admiration. "I really need your guidance. I've been so overwhelmed trying to manage it all." Clint ate it up. He puffed out his chest, his ego swelling. "Don't worry. You just look pretty and sign the papers. I'll handle the thinking." He grabbed my hand, squeezing it too hard. "I'm going to make us very rich." I let him hold my hand. I even smiled, but inside my thoughts were cold and sharp. "I'm not going to make you rich, Clint. I'm going to make you destitute." Diane looked at us from across the table, looking bored and victorious. She had no idea that the mouse she sold was about to burn the whole house down. The opportunity one needed arrived 2 days later in the form of a PR stunt. Diane demanded a mother-daughter spa day so we could be photographed looking relaxed and bonded for the tabloids. It was torture. We lay on massage tables in a private room, cucumbers on our eyes, while Diane lectured me on how to pose for the cameras. "Don't slouch, Alice. You look like a question mark," she muttered. Halfway through the session, the masseuse left to get hot towels. I sat up. "I need to use the restroom," I said. Diane waved her hand, dismissively, not even looking up. "Be quick." I didn't go to the restroom. I rushed to the private locker room where our purses were stored. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I needed the code to the internal security keypad that guarded her private bedroom wing. I found her phone, but it was locked. Then I remembered Diane was a creature of ego. I tried her birthday. Incorrect. I tried the company founding date. Incorrect. Then, with trembling fingers, I typed in the date of my father's death. The screen unlocked. It made me sick. To her, the day he died wasn't a tragedy. It was the day she took control. I scrolled to her notes app, found the alarm code, memorized it, and ran back to the massage room just as the door opened. That night, Diane attended a charity gala, leaving the house empty. I waited until the headlights of her limousine disappeared down the driveway before I moved. I punched the code into the keypad outside her master suite. The light turned green. I slipped inside. The room smelled of her overpowering perfume and secrets. I went straight to the large painting of herself that hung above the fireplace. Classic Diane arrogance. I felt behind the frame and found the latch. The painting swung open, revealing a heavy steel wall safe. This was the hard part. I didn't have the code for this. I tried the date of my father's death again. Error. I tried the date of her wedding. Error. I stood there, sweating, thinking about how Diane's mind worked. She kept things she was ashamed of hidden. She kept her sins locked away. I typed in my birthday. Click. The handle turned. My breath hitched. She kept the evidence of her crime locked under the date the sin was born. Inside was a single, sealed envelope titled, "To Alice when she is free." I tore it open. Inside was a handwritten note from my father. "If you are reading this, I failed to protect you. I love you, my Alice. Trust only your heart." Taped to the bottom of the note was a single, tarnished brass key. I took the key, my eyes filling with tears, and slipped it into my pocket. The next morning, I called in sick to the office and drove straight to First National Bank. This was the most dangerous part of the plan. The bank manager, Mr. Clifford, had known Diane for 20 years. I walked into his office with my head held high, wearing my most expensive suit. I placed the brass key on his desk. "I need to access my father's safety deposit box," I said firmly. Mr. Clifford frowned, adjusting his glasses. "Alice, usually your mother handles these matters. Does she know you're here?" He reached for his phone. I leaned forward, channeling every ounce of Clint's arrogance. Clint Doherty sent me. He needs the asset list immediately. Do you really want to interrupt his board meeting? The manager hesitated, his hand hovering over the phone. Then he typed something into his computer. He paused, looking surprised. Well, technically, your name is on the authorized access list. Your father added you the day you were born, though you've never used it. My heart squeezed. My father had left me a way in, even from the grave. Mr. Doherty is waiting, I said coolly. Right this way, he said, leading me down the long, cold corridor. He pulled out the long metal box, placed it on the table in the private viewing room, and left me alone. Before we reveal what was inside that box, I have to ask, if you have come with us this far, it means you are really invested in Alice's journey. Please do well to like this video, share it with a friend who loves a good thriller, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a part. Also, tell us in the comments where you are listening from. We love seeing our global community. Thank you. I stared at the gray metal box for a long moment, afraid to breathe. This was it. The truth. I inserted the brass key into the lock and turned it. The lid popped open. Inside, there were no jewels or gold bars. There was just a single, thick document bound in blue paper. The cover read, Last Will and Testament of Harrison Lakewood, unaltered original. I opened it to the beneficiary page. The words blurred through my tears before snapping into focus. I hereby leave 100% of the voting shares and assets of Lumina Fashion Group to my biological daughter, Alice Lakewood. To my wife, Diane, I leave a monthly stipend of $5,000, contingent on her good behavior. I covered my mouth to stifle a scream. She hadn't destroyed it. Why? Maybe out of arrogance, thinking I'd never find it. Or maybe some twisted part of her couldn't burn the last thing her husband ever signed. Whatever the reason, she had kept the smoking gun. She had been committing fraud every single day since my father died. I pulled out my phone and took high-resolution photos of every single page. I wanted to take the original, but I couldn't. If the box was empty, the bank manager might notice, and Diane would be tipped off before the wedding. I needed the element of surprise. I put the document back, locked the box, and walked out with the proof in my pocket. I drove home with my heart in my throat, the digital copies of the will burning a hole in my pocket. I pulled into the driveway, hoping to sneak back into my room before Diane returned from the office. But as I opened the front door, I froze. Diane was standing in the foyer, arms crossed, tapping her foot. Where were you? She demanded. I called the office. They said you were sick, but you're dressed for a meeting. Panic flooded my veins. She looked at my suit, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. I had to think fast. I couldn't let her know I had been at the bank. I held up a shopping bag I had kept in my trunk from a previous errand. I forced a shy, embarrassed smile. I wasn't sick, I lied. I wanted to go buy lingerie. For the honeymoon. I didn't want anyone at the office to know. Diane stared at me, searching for a crack in my story. The silence stretched for an agonizing 10 seconds. Then she sneered in disgust. Pathetic, she muttered. You really think lace is going to make a man like Clint care about you? She turned to walk away, but stopped and looked back over her shoulder. Make sure it's cheap, Alice. Clint won't care about the fabric, and I'm not wasting the budget on something that will end up on the floor. I watched her walk away. Once she was gone, I rushed to her room and slipped the brass key back into her safe, wiping my fingerprints. She would never know it had been touched. Her cruelty used to hurt me. Now it just fueled the fire. Enjoy the budget while you can, Diane, I thought, because you're about to lose every penny. With the evidence secured, I moved to the final phase of my plan, the setup. 2 days before the wedding, I met with the wedding planner and the audiovisual technician at the venue. It was a massive cathedral, cold and imposing, perfect for the funeral of Diane's reputation. I waited until the planner was busy yelling at the florist about the shade of the hydrangeas. I slipped into the sound booth where a young guy in a headset was testing the projector. Hey, I said softly, giving him my best nervous bride smile. I held out a small silver USB drive. I have a special request. This is a surprise video montage for my mother. It's very emotional. I want it to play right before the vows, when everyone is watching the big screen. The tech guy took the drive, weighing it in his hand. Does your mom know? Usually, she approves every pixel. No, I whispered, stepping closer. It's a tribute to everything she's done for me. If she sees it beforehand, it ruins the surprise. Please? It means the world to me. He looked at my desperate eyes and softened. You got it. Surprise, tribute coming up. I walked away, my heart pounding. He thought it was a montage of baby photos. He had no idea he was about to broadcast the DNA results and the stolen will to the entire city. The next day, the walls started closing in. I was in the kitchen getting water when Clint walked in. He wasn't smiling. He was holding a crumpled piece of paper, a receipt. It must have fallen out of my pocket when I grabbed my water glass. It was for a top-up card for the burner phone. He slammed the receipt onto the counter. Who are you talking to, Alice? I froze. I don't know what that is. Clint stepped into my personal space, trapping me against the granite island. His cologne was overpowering. Don't lie to me. You bought credit for a prepaid phone. Do you have a boyfriend? Are you planning to run? My mind raced. If he found the phone, he'd find Joy's number. It's a therapist, I blurted out. I've been having panic attacks about the wedding. I didn't want you or Diane to think I was crazy, so I called a hotline. Clint stared at me, his eyes cold and calculating. Slowly, a cruel smirk spread across his face. He leaned down and whispered in my ear, Cancel the therapist, Alice. You don't need one. Once we're married, I'll tell you exactly what to think and how to feel. He walked away laughing. He thought he had one. He didn't realize he had just given me even more reason to destroy him. Later that night, I snuck out of the house for the most important meeting of my life. I drove to a derelict parking lot on the edge of town, my hands slick with sweat on the steering wheel. A rusted sedan was waiting in the shadows. I parked next to it and rolled down my window. The other window rolled down. For the first time, I looked into the face of Joy, my biological mother. She looked tired, her face lined with years of fear and hiding. But her eyes, they were my eyes. We didn't speak at first. We just reached through the open windows and touched hands. Her skin was warm. It was the first motherly touch I had ever felt that didn't come with strings attached. You look just like him, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. We don't have much time, I said, my voice shaking. I have the will. I have the DNA. Joy nodded and handed me a folder. This is the last piece. The death certificate for your father. Look at the signature. I looked. Diane had signed as the sole heir. It was proof of perjury. Suddenly, headlights swept across the lot. A car was driving by slowly. Go. Joy hissed. If she sees us together, it's over. I sped away, my heart hammering, leaving my mother behind in the dark one last time. The rehearsal dinner was held at the country club the night before the wedding. It was a display of obscene wealth. There were ice sculptures, a string quartet, and hundreds of guests who only cared about the merger. Diane stood up to give a speech. She looked immaculate in silk. To my daughter, she lied, raising her glass, and to the unity of our families. We are building a legacy that will last forever. The room applauded. I stood up, my glass raised. I looked Diane dead in the eye. To the truth, I said, my voice clear and cutting through the chatter. It has a funny way of always coming out, doesn't it? The guests laughed, thinking it was a philosophical toast. Diane didn't laugh. Her smile faltered. She pulled me aside 10 minutes later, her grip like iron on my elbow. She dragged me into the hallway. You're acting strange, Alice. I don't like it. I'm just excited, Mother, I said flatly. Diane leaned in, her face twisting into a snarl. Don't you dare embarrass me tomorrow. If you pull a stunt, I won't just hurt you. I'll make that call to the psychiatric hospital. I'll have you committed so fast you won't see daylight for a decade." She shoved me away and walked back to the party. She was threatening my sanity just to keep me in line. She was a monster. I was in my bedroom, staring at the ceiling, when the door creaked open. It was midnight. The wedding was in 10 hours. Diane walked in. She didn't knock. She never knocked. She stood at the foot of my bed, watching me like a warden checking on a prisoner. "You should be asleep," she said. Her voice wasn't angry anymore, it was just cold. "I can't sleep," I replied, pulling the covers up. Diane stepped closer into the moonlight. She looked at my face, really looked at it, with an expression of pure hatred. "You look just like her," she whispered. "Every time I look at you, I see the woman who tried to ruin my life. It makes me sick." It was the first time she had ever admitted it out loud. She didn't hate me for being clumsy or shy. She hated me for existing. I sat up and looked at her. I wasn't afraid anymore. "Good night, Diane," I said softly. I didn't call her mom. I didn't call her mother. I called her by her name. Diane paused. She looked unsettled, sensing a shift she couldn't quite name. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. She turned and walked out, closing the door. She thought she was locking me in for the night. She didn't realize she was locking herself out of the only chance for mercy she had left. The morning of the wedding was a blur of hairspray and panic. The bridal suite was filled with makeup artists, stylists, and florists running around like headless chickens. I sat in the center of the chaos, perfectly still. My reflection in the mirror showed a beautiful bride, but behind my eyes there was a soldier ready for war. While the stylist pinned my veil, I secretly pulled my phone from the pocket of my robe. I sent a single text message to the lawyer I had hired 2 days ago using the burner phone. "Are the police on standby?" 3 agonizing dots appeared on the screen. Then the reply came, "We are outside. The evidence package was submitted to the DA yesterday. We are ready." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Suddenly, the phone was ripped from my hands. Diane stood over me, looking furious. She shoved my phone into her clutch. "No distractions today, Alice," she snapped, smoothing her silk dress. "You need to focus on smiling. You look pale. Pinch your cheeks." She turned to the makeup artist. "More blush. She looks like a corpse." I sat there, stripped of my connection to the outside world. Diane thought she had disarmed me. She didn't realize that the weapon wasn't the phone. The weapon was the USB drive already loaded in the projection booth. I didn't need to text anyone anymore. I just needed to walk. The organ music began, a deep, vibrating sound that shook the floorboards of the cathedral. The heavy oak door swung open, revealing a sea of hundreds of guests. The flash of cameras was blinding. At the end of the long, red carpet stood Clint. He looked smug, adjusting his cufflinks, thinking he was minutes away from owning a fortune. Diane linked her arm through mine. Her grip was tight, her fingers digging into my bicep hard enough to bruise. It wasn't a comforting hold, it was a shackle. "Walk," she hissed through her frozen smile, "and don't you dare trip." We began the slow march down the aisle. Every face turned to look at us. They saw a loving mother giving away her daughter. I saw witnesses to a crime. My heart hammered against my ribs, loud enough that I thought the microphone would pick it up. I looked at Clint, then past him, directly at the camera crew on the balcony. The audiovisual technician gave me a tiny, imperceptible nod. We reached the altar. Diane let go of my arm, but her presence still loomed over me like a shadow. She moved to take her seat in the front row, smoothing her skirt, looking like the picture of elegance. I remained standing, but I didn't look at the priest. I took a deep breath. It was time. The music faded to silence. The priest cleared his throat and looked out at the congregation. "We are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." He looked at Diane. Who gives this woman to be married to this man? Diane stood up gracefully, a handkerchief in her hand for fake tears. I do, she said, her voice projecting clearly. I stepped forward, grabbing the microphone from the stand before the priest could continue. My voice rang out, sharp and steady. Actually, I said, she can't. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Clint frowned, stepping toward me. Alice, what are you doing? Put the mic down. I ignored him. I looked straight at Diane. You can't give me away, Diane, because I don't belong to you. You didn't adopt me. You stole me. I raised my hand and signaled the booth. Now. The massive screen behind the altar, meant for a montage of childhood photos, flickered to life. But it wasn't baby pictures. It was the DNA test result, blown up 10 feet tall. Diane Lakewood, 0% match. Then the slide changed. It was the true will. I leave 100% of the company to my biological daughter, Alice. The cathedral went deathly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Diane's face drained of all color, turning a ghostly white. She stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. That's a lie! She finally screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. She's mentally unstable. Turn it off. Turn it off. It's not a lie, Diane, I said into the microphone, my voice booming. It's evidence. I pointed to the back of the church. Officers, please. The heavy doors banged open again. This time it wasn't guests. It was 4 police officers and my lawyer holding a warrant. They marched down the aisle, the sound of their boots heavy on the stone floor. Diane tried to run. She actually tried to scramble over the pew, tripping in her heels. An officer grabbed her arm, spinning her around. Diane Lakewood, based on the evidence submitted to the district attorney, you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and kidnapping. Clint saw the ship sinking and tried to bail. He made a dash for the side exit, pushing a bridesmaid out of the way. But the security guards I had privately hired were waiting. They tackled him to the ground before he even reached the door. I stood at the altar, alone but not lonely, watching the 2 people who had enslaved me get dragged away in handcuffs. I didn't cry. I just watched until they were gone. 1 month later, the steps of the cathedral were just a memory. I stood in the CEO's office at Lumina headquarters. The dark, heavy curtains Diane loved were gone, replaced by open windows that let the sunlight pour in. On the news playing in the corner, a reporter was showing footage of Diane's legal battle. She had been denied bail and was facing charges that could carry 20 years in prison. Clint was facing charges for extortion and attempted IP theft. Their empire of lies had crumbled to dust. I turned away from the screen. Sitting on the beige sofa was Joy, my mom. She was reading a book, looking peaceful. She looked up and smiled at me, a smile that mirrored my own. We were taking it slow, learning to be a family again, but she was here. She was safe. I looked down at the paperwork on my desk. It was the dissolution of the merger with Clint's company. I signed my name at the bottom, Alice Lakewood, CEO. I wasn't the invisible ghost designer anymore. I wasn't the stray. I was the owner. I picked up my pen and looked out the window at the city skyline. I had spent my whole life trying to grow in the dark, thinking I was being buried. I didn't realize until now that I wasn't being buried. I was being planted. She tried to bury me, I whispered to the empty room. She forgot I was a seed.
This story reminds us that blood doesn't make you family, love does. But more importantly, it teaches us to trust our instincts. Alice knew deep down that something was wrong with how she was treated, but she stayed out of loyalty to a person who didn't deserve it. The lesson: never let anyone, not even family, make you feel like you owe them your life, your talent, or your happiness. If love feels like a cage, it isn't love. It's control. Know your worth, and don't be afraid to break the rules to find your freedom. Thank you so much for listening to Alice's journey with us. It was a roller coaster of emotions, and we hope you felt every twist and turn. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more viral thrillers like this, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. Tell us in the comments, would you have forgiven Diane, or did she get exactly what she deserved? Type Team Alice if you think she did the right thing. See you in the next story.